I have an update for you when it comes to Sarah Boone's life behind bars. And needless to say, she is not going to be very happy with the situation she has put herself in. Now, before we get into that, I do want to mention I have my first video out on Lori Daybell. If you have not taken a look at that, it's in its own playlist. It'll include future videos. And what we do is we start at the very beginning, essentially. You are going to see footage of her husband basically begging the police to help him. His wife is mentally unwell, and even after he gets an order to have her get a mental health evaluation, the police give Lori tips on how to avoid it, how to run away from having a mental health care assessment. It is absolutely wild, and as I said, it has its own video. And I had some people mention, well, her name is still legally Lori Vallow, and it wasn't changed. Look, if you try to look her up on YouTube, when people look her up, people search Lori Daybell, Daybell Murders. It's what people try to find her as. Wikipedia lists her as Lori Vallow Daybell, so I went with what I thought would have people who are interested in the video actually finding the video. Hopefully that explains why I refer to her in such a way. Now, back to Sarah Boone. Here we have the Corrections Offender Network, and nothing is going to look that different. We have her mugshot, but you will notice that while she's still in reception, her custody level says the word close. Sarah Boone is in close custody. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you haven't watched my previous video on Sarah Boone, I actually go through the inmate handbook she is given when she arrived in reception. And it has that answer for us. Let's go through all the custody assignments so we can know exactly what Sarah Boone is missing out on. An issue that inmates are usually concerned about is their custody level. Your custody is determined by a number of factors, including length of sentence, criminal history, any history of violence, escape history, a number of other important factors. Your classification officer will explain your custody in more detail at your classification interview. The following are the current custody classifications. Community. Community custody refers to that class of inmates who are eligible for placement at a community residential facility. Thankfully, not Sarah Boone. Minimum. Minimum custody refers to that class of inmates who are eligible for outside work assignments, but not for placement at a community residential facility. Again, so glad that's not Sarah Boone. Medium custody refers to that class of inmates who are eligible for placement at a work camp with a secure perimeter, but who are not eligible for placement in an outside work assignment without armed supervision. I thought maybe Sarah could possibly slip her way into that. But then we have the next level, close. Close custody refers to that class of inmates who must be maintained within an armed perimeter or under direct armed supervision when outside of a secure perimeter. And of course, that is below maximum. Maximum custody refers to that class of inmates who are under a sentence of death. Sarah Boone is being held one classification below death row inmates. Now, is this because of her murder life sentence? Possibly. Possibly. And that would still be her fault. I mean, her entire sentencing could possibly have been her fault. I would not be shocked if the judge was battling around in his head whether to give her a life sentence, and she verified it with what she had to say in court. But Sarah's also caused problems in jail. A lot of problems. Documented problems. We have her plotting against other inmates. We have her not listening to directions. And maybe that was a factor here. Or maybe Sarah Boone kept her jail attitude, where Sarah seemed to think she could get away with a lot of things, and kind of did in a lot of instances. She wasn't exactly being held in solitary confinement. But if she kept that attitude in prison, or at least the reception center, maybe that played a role for why she is in close custody. That is the situation we have with Sarah Boone. Now, we've had no letters, we've had nothing else come out, and I do expect we will eventually. So at this point, I guess I'll just do a little update on what I'm covering on the channel. I've found the Giuliani stuff rather fascinating because personally, I think he is setting himself up for another contempt hearing. I think he's going to be found in contempt again. He was found in contempt twice in 1 week. Mike Lindell's legal issues are always interesting because it seems to always be piled on. His business is in trouble. He's personally in trouble. It is an absolute mess when it comes to Mike Lindell. And then we have the convoy in Canada, which if you haven't followed a convoy before, they are an absolute mess. We had people in America firing shots at an overpass. We had people in Canada bringing weaponry and planning things against border. Like, I guess at the Canadian border, they brought weapons and had plots. We've had people in basically every convoy literally use their children as human shields. And now we have another convoy that is trying to get started. And the previous convoy leaders that are normally all ready to support a convoy are outright, many of them, calling this one out. They want nothing to do with it. There's a lot of infighting. A lot of the leaders are faceless. The ones that aren't are problematic. Things are just not going well for that whole movement. And their protest, of course, is in winter in Canada. I don't believe Parliament's even there, so that seems to be a trend with the Canadian convoys, by the way. Convoys love to go to places where politicians aren't and complain when no one's there to even possibly see them from the government. They love to do that. I don't know why. Maybe it's because, well, I do know why. Because being effective doesn't matter. No convoy has ever succeeded in anything, but they want the attention, and they hope that, no one's going to be talking about politicians because they aren't there. Maybe they'll talk about us in those segments, which sometimes happens, and it's mostly people poking fun at how poorly the protests go. You find that in even mainstream media when it comes to a convoy. But I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on that. But a lot of convoys dissolve into nothingness, so at any point that could be a nothingness. Now, as I said, I do plan to do more Lori Daybell, Lori Vallow content. That's something I plan to do. As February comes in, there are quite a few games coming out that I may be covering on my gaming channel, and that could possibly take a significant amount of time. So the content on this channel might have to slow as I'm trying to balance between the two. And I do apologize for that, but I think anyone who's followed the channel for a while has noticed that even when I say I'm taking a break, I have a tendency to still show up and put out a video or two during that time, so there'll probably still be content coming out. As always, I'm going to be checking a lot of different cases, some of them that I do videos on, some that I don't. Sarah Boone's one of them. I saw people mentioning her custody was decided, and I felt like I should probably share that because I mentioned in my video I wondered where she was going to end up, and we have the answer. Close custody. Not great for Sarah. I'll see you in the next video. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, check out the Lori Vallow, Lori Daybell stuff. If you haven't seen those body cams, it is absolutely wild to see. How do I want to word this? I would say how biased the police are in her favor. It's eye-opening. It's in a lot of ways like what you expect, to be honest. I expected them to be on her side with a lot of it, and then as soon as he got the actual she needs to go in for a mental health evaluation, the moment they started giving her tips on how to avoid it, don't answer the door, leave before it gets here, that blew me away. It's wild to know that with hindsight what happened, that they were doing that with her, and that is, I can't imagine a standard protocol for the police. I can't imagine that.